So, yeah, just kick it off. This is myself and Gaines AI generated images.
As you can see, we look better as far as what the AI thinks. But
Yeah, first ever reveal of us in live person. So, yeah. So,
Bob actually updated his LinkedIn to be his AI picture. So go add him and say
haven't it
hello.
back yet. We'll see how long it lasts. So, but
Well,
yeah,
also, thank you guys for joining. We appreciate your time. We're gonna go through distro stuff and how we use it, and some of the new cool features with it. Also, some roadmap stuff, just as an agenda item too. So, if you've used distro, there's some stuff you'll learn about. Some new stuff if you haven't used distro and are exploring. We'll give you the 101 breakdown, some of the things we use internally at Chili Pepper too. So we don't expect to take the full 45 minutes, probably 20, 25, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So thank you guys.
yeah, and I think just sort of like it explains here, we'll just go through use cases from top of funnel all the way to post funnel. So on my side, I do ops here. So covers a lot of different avenues of things, but I'll touch on the first initial ones, mostly like applicable to sales, SDR use cases, and games does most of post sales with CS team. So
And so I think an interesting little tidbit of information about Scott and I. We were, I think Scott was the sixth employee here at Chili Piper, and I was the eighth. Scott actually pulled me in from Marquetta, where we worked together, to come join Chili Piper. We actually wanted to buy Chili Piper at Marquetta, and we got told no because we were SDRs at the time, and nobody wants to listen to SDRs apparently. But we've seen a long evolution of the Chili Pepper product. And so, as far as distro goes and the high level of it, if you've used Chili Pepper Concierge and Handoff and the Instant Booker, obviously there's a bunch of round robining things, rules for routing, field updates in Salesforce, ownership updates. Um, so as that evolved, we realized, okay, well, not every time you need to do an assignment that's being done through a meeting booked or through a web form fill. And so there's other times where you need to route something in Salesforce, whether it's a lead, a contact, a case, an opportunity, an account. That we don't necessarily solve for, but it's very much a piece that we should solve for because it's right in our game of sales ops and revenue ops, marketing ops. So that's kind of the evolution Scott and I've been lucky enough to see and grow, and we've been really excited about distro and have used it for a bunch of different use cases internally. So hopefully you guys can see some of that, and maybe it'll spark some ideas on different things you can do in your processes at your company.
yeah. And so like I mentioned, we'll touch on these use cases and we'll just leave like the end for open Q&A to go more in the weeds on it. So touch on the first one, distributing leads. So just to set like the context and kind of talk a little bit about how we have it set up internally and then just like the goal we're trying to accomplish. So I'd say this one's pretty applicable to most any business. If you get leads from events, webinars, people who request demos and you don't have concierge, you want to get them followed up with pretty quickly. So we'll touch on this and just kind of the core pieces on how to set it up, and we'll go through an actual live example with lead distribution. So there are three core concepts within a router within Distro, and all of this being tied to Salesforce standard objects. So whether you're looking at leads, contacts, or accounts, basically you're just looking for that trigger, and then you're setting entry conditions on those routing rules, which just look at any standard or custom fields that would enter the trigger. And then based on that, you just have a team who you want to assign the record to. Maybe you have like an SLA tied to that. And then you could update fields, add notifications, and so on. So lead notifications for events, like for example, if you went to like Dreamforce, we'll go through an example like that. So I'm going to pull open one of our actual routers that we've got. And then if y'all got like questions in the chat, you want to like go through specific questions around this, just feel free to pop in. So starting with the routers inside of Distro, it's much like Salesforce Flow. So if you're Salesforce admin or you set up flows inside of Salesforce, we're just looking at the object that you're going to trigger it off of. So like leads, contacts, or accounts would be the most applicable for this one. And then we can do record creation or updates, or you could do the record is created or updated. So similar as you'd be setting up a Salesforce flow, and then you just select the field value that you want to listen for to be updated.
Yeah, and this is new as of about 2 months ago. Before it was just, was it created or was it updated? And if you want to do two, you have to have two routers. So I'm a big fan of the fact that you can do two at once with the same trigger, all in one router.
Yep. And so once you've got some record that hits that trigger, you can set up entry criteria. So you basically just apply a rule to filter out specific records that hit that criteria. So you're not having every single one of them run through distro and reps hitting you up asking why they get routed these. So on the rules, to set up that initial, like, let's say filter at the top of the funnel, you just select that object that you're doing the routing off of and then add in different fields. So like if you did this one, for example, with like Dreamforce, you could do like lead source as an example. And then you can go through, there's a few different operators that you can configure on this. And this ties to, there's two different types of rules, which we'll touch on a little bit later, which is like ownership or like non-ownership routing rules. But essentially you go and select the field, the operator right here, and then whatever lead source it is. So like I'll just go and select this one in that generic example, and then you can publish that rule. So won't update this just for the sake of keeping it intact, but that basically just sets the filters at the top of the funnel. And then once those records come through, it sets up the routing rules for how you want to distribute those records. So if I go and look at this is the difference with ownership. So if first node we're basically looking at is if somebody owns that lead record in Salesforce, and if it matches that record criteria on the rules, then we're basically going to assign that record to the account managers, and then they'll get the alert, and then we do a field update following that as well. And we did just recently release a way to have multiple updates on one node. So like that way we don't have to have a different field update in a different node. But if you want to update other values, you can go and do that. And then you can add an action tied to that object. So like if you want to update this one does the status, if you want to update like maybe a checkbox field or something that somebody's working it, or whatever like marketing signal you want to shoot over to the sales team, that's an option as well.
Scott, we had a question come in. Can you have a role-based trigger, for example, from the user object so that you don't have to add new users manually to the flow?
For the teams?
Yeah, it just says a role-based trigger. So yeah, I guess for the teams.
Currently, to my knowledge, there's not a way to say like, hey, if they're in like the account manager role in Salesforce, then assign them to this team. I know I've mentioned that as far as like an actual feature and product use case. But basically to configure a team, if I want to go and set up one, you can go down here and then you can just go and create a team. And then this would pull from the Salesforce users who are assigned to this workspace. So if you go and click through a few different reps that you want to assign to a team here, then you just name it, and then you create the team, and then you can select from that team in the router.
Son, I do know too that we've seen design specs from our product team about ways in which you can create rules in which you bring a user in, assign them a license, and add them to specific teams based off when they get created in Salesforce, or if their role or profile changes. That's not live yet, but I understand that's something we're working on in the coming future. So not yet. Still got to go add the users in manually, kind of like what you do queues for the most part. But that's something we're thinking about for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And then in teams, like you can see where they're used within a router, for example. So like if I went to the account manager one and you want to look and see the usage, so this is where you can see, like, for example, in one of those routers, where is that team referenced? So I'll go back to the MQL one, and then I think that mostly touches on like the big highlights for lead routing. Obviously, you can go in here and set up the SLAs, like I was touching on a little bit earlier. This is going to it's essentially it's going to look at the calendar of the rep as far as, let's say, for example, if they're on vacation, you obviously don't want to assign records to them. So it'll factor that in based on the team that it's looking at with distribution. And then here you're just setting up the length of time of which, how long you want to wait. So depending if that's reflective of their working hours that the rep sets in Chili Piper, or just kicking off immediately. And then you can go and drill down into seconds, minutes, and hours as far as the SLA goes. Similar, as I already explained over here too, you can do field updates and evaluate that criteria for the SLA. So something we do, for example, is like if an inbound demo comes in and they don't book, we'll wait 24 hours. And then if nobody follows up, for example, if the lead status isn't updated to working as an example, then we'll reassign the record and shoot the rep a Slack message. Okay, so next one, is there any other questions in the chat? I think Cam was asking about nodes going in sequential order in the case of dependent fields. I guess as far as sequential order, maybe if you can add a little bit more detail around that. The main thing that you're setting up in sequential order is basically like the waterfall of how you want it to evaluate. So like this one, I think, and let me know if this answers your question, is just looking at ownership first. And then if you go further down in the funnel, there's a rule like without ownership. And then ultimately, if you want to have one that's just a catch-all queue, just to make sure every single route, like record that enters it is accounted for, you can go and set that up as well, if that answers your question on the nodes. Yep, it is. Yeah, it would be a waterfall type of logic. So cool. So I'll go to this next use case as well. So assigning records to Salesforce campaigns. So complementary to the flow that I really just showed you with leads. This is typically going to be used for some type of marketing purpose for reporting. So like, again, you could kind of go back to the flow of if you were attending Dreamforce, you've got a Dreamforce campaign in Salesforce. And if marketing uploads a list in your market automation system, like whether it's Marketo, HubSpot, Pardot, whatever system it is, and then those flow down into Salesforce and you want to listen for an update and add them to a Salesforce campaign. That's pretty common use case as well. So I'll just use the same example because I'd say pretty applicable use case. So if you go into this ownership queue and then they meet this criteria right here, ultimately, once they get assigned to that team and then the value gets updated, this is where you can just go and select the Salesforce campaign that you want them to be added to, and then you can update that campaign member status. So whatever member status is that you have reflective of that campaign, it'll reflect down here. And then once they're added to the campaign, you could, of course, go and see that info inside of Salesforce.
Which actually is the campaign that we were on this meeting. So, that was pretty cool to add because we're using that. It's like Inception.
Yeah. Yep. So we use that for marketing events pretty commonly. We use HubSpot internally. So we'll upload that list, and then similar kind of deal is Distro will just look for that field update, and then it'll go through the flow and update people to that specific campaign that we have going. So that one's pretty straightforward and pretty simple. I think next one, I definitely appreciate and like this one the most personally. Lead to account conversion. So this one, the main goal that we were trying to accomplish internally, like a lot of teams typically want to do inside of Salesforce, is work primarily in contacts and accounts. We've gone through the whole spiel where you can go and have Apex code, you can have flows for different systems that can do like the lead to account conversion. Personally, I found this a lot simpler to manage, and we can touch on a little bit on how the lead matches to accounts because I know that's super important. You don't want a bunch of leads going to the wrong accounts. So we'll touch a little bit on how this works, how we do it internally, and then some field updates that happen inside of Salesforce, depending on where you want to do reporting. And then we'll look at logs as well, which tie to this really well. So this is like in our production instance for what we do here internally. So like I mentioned, the main goal that we were initially going for was any lead that's created, or if they have a meeting that's booked, we'll go through the full flow on this, wait for field updates to happen from enrichment systems that we have kicking off. And then optionally, we'll just create the record for the contact and account, or create an op, for example, if we have a meeting scheduled. So starting from the top right here, I know I already touched on the triggers, same kind of deal where we have a record looking for creation or update on that field. The delay step that we have here is just purposefully so Clearbit can enrich the record, and we don't have any use cases where something like there's a gap in enrichment and then for whatever reason it would not hit one of these nodes. So in the routing rules right here for what we're looking at, this is just with the meeting type value, this is being updated through Chili Piper on the lead record. So basically, any of these leads that are created, like for example, if they submit a demo request and they don't book, they're going to be assigned to our account executive team. And we don't want to waste our time, obviously, like on a bunch of test records or like just BS emails that are not corporate domains. So that's where we have a little bit of this extra criteria in here. And then once it meets that criteria of knowing it's a scheduled demo, we'll create the opportunity on this. So I'll go through the full flow and look at a little log example to show you this. But to break it down in terms of like the actual steps that it flows on lead conversion is you have the conversion status associated with that in Salesforce. So if you're familiar on the lead status, when you do lead conversion field mapping inside of Salesforce, you have to have a converted status. So if you have like more than one converted status, you can go and select that. So for us, it's just sales qualified. And then we do create an op once the meeting is scheduled. So it'll have the lead created, it'll convert it to a contact and account, and it'll match those records and then create the op associated with those records as well. And then there is optionality if you want to always create a new account. This just depends on, like, I'd say different nuance details and how some teams want rules set up for their lead conversion process. And then just going a little bit further down here, this is more just, I'd say like disqualified records if they come through, or if they don't book, we still want to convert that record. So we have the contact and account information. And then ultimately, if a record is just created, we're still going to convert that so it matches based on the domain to the existing account. So on the matching piece of it, I think it's probably a little bit important to touch on. Gaines, you want to highlight a little bit on the contact and account matching part of it?
If you want to go, since you're sharing, if you want to scroll down to the settings portion for the account matching.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is useful. It's where it's very similar to regular Chili Piper, where it picks the contact with the most amount of matched accounts, but you can create additional filter criteria. For example, like if you have 2 accounts for Amazon, one Amazon, which is based in Amazon EMEA, and one Amazon US, and then maybe on the lead record you have a form field, or you have a field that's the country. So it's like, well, the country is Germany, France. You want to use country and match it to the country as well on the account object, so that like you can split it and say, okay, well, in this particular case, I'm going to take the lead value from the country, and since there's 2 accounts for Amazon, pick the one where the country matches. So it's some cool filter criteria and rules you can do here to make that decision. So it's using some different criteria to basically search in Salesforce to determine which is the right account, which is pretty similar to what you're going to see in most tools, and how does that logic.
Yeah. And like you see, like you can pick any standard custom field. These are a little bit more advanced match capabilities that we put here with these little flags right here. And then for us internally, we're just looking at these two roles. So number of matching contacts, scanning that email domain. So that way you don't have a bunch of, say, like unmatched accounts. So you're ensuring that the record that's converted goes to the right account, and you just maintain data cleanliness. Now, of course, this is not going to be applicable to like existing contacts. So like if the record's an existing contact, you can just do lead triggers to assign and alert people through that. So I'm going to go back real quick on the logic of this. I think it's important to touch on the logs and how that works. So for example, if we're converting a record and creating an op right here, you can go and see logs that basically break it down exactly as far as you can see the steps that it went through and then what ultimately happened and links to the records in Salesforce. So if I go to the lead conversion router and click into one of these records, so this was a record distributed, I don't know, about a little bit more than an hour ago. So you can see the field updates that happened here on the trigger, and then the paths that it took. So for example, this one had no demo scheduled. And then ultimately we convert that lead record right here as well. So if you go to view that record inside of Salesforce, there's a few different distro fields that you can go in and optionally add into Salesforce, depending on what you want to track. But ultimately, it's going to show you that contact record associated to the account. And then if you look at the contact history, you can see that it was converted at that date and time. So we're just in PST standard time for the system inside of Salesforce. And then for the actual fields that we're looking at, we've got, let me pull open the Chili Piper fields down here. So some of these fields, just depending on what you have set up on that object. In this case, we've got distro converted, so you can know that distro was that actual source of running the conversion. And on the conversion piece, there's no Apex code or flows that you actually have to maintain inside of Salesforce, which is a nice little plus as well. So I think that hits on the main parts as far as like top of the funnel, like lead conversion and routing of records, unless is there any open Q&A on questions that people want to go through? I think, yeah, maybe Gaines, you want to hop in and talk a little bit more about sales motion?
Yeah, I'll take over. All right. So Scott's talking about how not a lot of Salesforce stuff going on as far as flows and whatnot. Me, on the other hand, I like to use all my tools. And I think one big thing about this is we use heavily a combination of HubSpot, Salesforce, sometimes Snowflake, and Chili Piper and regular Chili Piper, all kind of in conjunction together. And I think probably most people do as well. So I think one of the things that we've done that's really, really cool that I basically am in charge of is the request for solution consulting. So obviously our sales reps sometimes need a more technical resource. And so what I'm going to do is show you how that works and how we built it. We use a screen flow. So we have this example op here. And so if I'm an AE and I need a resource, all I got to do is click request an SC, pulls up in a screen flow from Salesforce that we say, okay, what type of request do you need? I need call support. They're on at the end of a demo, setting up their next steps. So I need an external call. Like I need to talk about cool stuff, right? So I can click next. And what's going to happen is this runs some updates. It's then going to trigger Distro to run, look for a solutions consultant, assign it, and then it's going to pull up a calendar for me to book with that person that Distro assigned it to. So at this point, Distro has assigned the record to the op. The Chili Piper tool right here will pop up, basically reference the op, pull up Alan Chow's calendar. And so now I'm going to go book a meeting with Alan Chow as my guest and say, hey, Mr. Customer, how's, I don't know, it's next week at whatever time works, 12 p.m. Boom, book it, done. Next step's done, got my customer booked. Super simple and easy for the AEs, which I think we all know. We want to keep it easy for the AEs and basically anybody we can keep it simple for. So how did that work? Well, first of all, we have a flow in Salesforce that runs this process. So basically it's going through, and really the piece I want to show in reference to Distro is I have an updated a custom field called SC assigned to true. And then it runs through some things. I end up sending a Slack message to a channel to let the SCs know, and I can monitor what the AEs are looking for help for, so that if there's something that they don't all fully understand, I can do some more enablement on it. But the way that this works is I basically listen for that field update on the op, SC assigned, and then when that value becomes true, right? There's not a solutions consultant already. That field is updated to true. Then I'm going to use my routing rule for this and assign it between 4 of my CSMs who work to basically handle the SC assignment. So I just ran a real assignment. And so Alan's going to get skipped next time. That's not fair, is it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to credit him back. So I can click on fairness. As you can see, Alan just had one. What I'm going to do is give him a -1, publish it. Now he's credited back for that op he just skipped. So again, on my op in Salesforce, where did it go? Did I close it? So if I
Yeah,
refresh this, I should see an SC assigned to the op itself. And so very simple process running together. There's Alan assigned to the solutions consulting field. Again, that's who we booked with. So super easy, simple process that keeps everybody updated on everything. And we can run reports on it and see who's closed the most ops. And we give a little kickback to the guys who help out in the SC piece if the opportunity is closed one. So easy peasy. I mean, I know I went through that fast, but it's a very simple user experience for us to be able to assign an SC resource, which often can be a difficult thing to do and can have a lot of different pieces of it. All right, the next piece is one that I've worked on for quite some time. It's new customer onboarding assignment flow. If you guys, I'm assuming most of the time you have a CSM or an account manager or both, sometimes getting assigned to go onboard a new customer. For most cases I've seen, a lot of times people will typically have their person who's the CS manager, or like the onboarding manager, just do it manually. I used to do that. I got sick of it and said, okay, we're going to figure out a way to do this where I don't have to do it every time because I don't have time for that. So similar on this op, let's say, this lead came in through the webinar, then we got an SC involved. Now we're ready to close one the op. So then I have a button on here that is, let's see. Do I need to add product?
You might have to click through a few fields, most likely.
Anyways, the idea is we have a button
you-
here that Scott keeps it so they have to fill out information and price out the op and everything, which is probably smart. But once they do it, they fill out some information, and then basically what it's going to do is close one the op. And when the op gets closed one, we need to assign a CSM and an account manager, because that's what we do in Chili Piper. And one of my favorite things about Distro, which is kind of simple, but I love it, it's the fact that not only can I cross objects, so I go from the op to the account, but I can hit custom fields on the custom lookup user fields on the account object and assign them. It's not just the standard lead owner. It's not just the standard contact and account owner. It's also custom fields, which is what we're doing here. And so basically what I'm doing is I have a trigger. This one. So basically I'm looking for an opportunity. Stage name becomes closed one. So when that opportunity becomes closed one, right, it's a new business op, closes, that enters the router. And then what I'm going to do is check to see if it's already owned, but then also like feed it through a bunch of different routing rules that we have for internal, because we split by territory, but also by how much money you spend. So if your op is less than 5K, you're considered SMB. So again, I have rules here that are saying, hey, is your account company with this? So are you less than $5,000 in spend? Then I'm going to round robin it between my 2 guys who support that. And then what's also, I just added this recently, which is a cool idea for Cam. You'll probably like this idea. I want more reporting in Salesforce. I like my quick debugging and looking at something in Salesforce. So I recently added 3 custom fields in Salesforce where I distro router name, distro routing rule, distro team name, where I went through and basically stamp in Salesforce what are the values I'm hitting for each of these. So that when I pull up the account to look at something, I can just quickly see, okay, well, which routing rule, which team name did this hit? And I'm using the field update nodes in here, which Cam was asking about before, to do that so I can not only run reports on it, but debug it as I need it, and potentially run other automations in Salesforce based off these field updates, right? I can say account has been assigned. Okay, good, check. Now, the last thing I do with this, I don't know if I had the other flow open. I do. But anyways, once we get this assignment process running, it's a little bit hairy. You guys use flows. You guys probably have a few of these that look like this. But I then have a email fire off from the AE to all the account teams. So I get Distro to assign it, and then basically I fire off an email out of Salesforce. Say, hey, Daniel, you're the account manager. Alan, you're the CS owner. Here's some details about the customer. And then so, hey, AE, let's go ahead and intro the CSM using Chili Piper, suggest some times for a kickoff call. So for the AE's point of view, also extremely simple and not a lot to it. They just fill out the information and then we just let the system take care of the rest. Behind the scenes, what's happening is complicated. Scott and I and a couple other people have done the complicated part, but that's what we do in operations, right? We do the technical stuff for our sales reps, and our CS reps do the simple stuff of, hey, I just got to sign the lead. Here's the notes in Salesforce. Let's go get them onboarded. So again, this has come a long evolution of how we've gotten to this point, but we used to have the AEs go through and do these manual booking processes that were really complicated. But a lot of times I would have to go determine who was taking what. But now we basically let the system do it because we built Distro to be able to do this, and I think it's great, and it's been working very, very good for us over the past few years. So, anyways, questions if we got them. But before we before we just jump to questions. So Scott built a new process with some other people to basically get 30-day free trials of Distro if you're not on it yet. There's a little website piece here where you can sign up and get added to it. I think, hopefully you guys are thinking this GIF is funny. Finally, we got a good GIF game. So check it out. I think there are plans to have Distro and HubSpot eventually. We're going to have to architect it differently. But there is a way to do it that doesn't have all the cool little feature updates, but you can use a router or concierge you can basically call an API and route it for HubSpot. Mary, I see your question there. If you're interested in running through that, let me know. I know HubSpot also has the rotator thing if you use HubSpot CRM. So if there's some things that you're lacking with that you're looking for, maybe we can talk more. But anyways, do we have anything in Q&A? No?
Yeah, I guess any scenarios people want to kind of walk through on their own that we could touch on?
We had questions beforehand.
follow-up.
Someone asked about lead to content conversion. They do that with lead and data currently. So is that something we can do with Distro too?
Yeah, that was one of the core ones we touch on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's right. That's right. So there's a lot. I would say Distro as of recent has probably been our primary. We've been doing a lot of engineering and build time on this. There lots of new updates are coming frequently. I think all of these new things have been like more or less like in the past 3 months, maybe. These are all pretty useful updates. Now there's more stuff coming too. Capping, I don't know. I thought there were 2 or 3 more listed in here before, but there's a handful of really cool updates coming too. And I expect 2024 to be a big year for Distro. There's a lot of, I'll give a shout out to our product manager, Nathan. He's 11-time Salesforce certified expert. And he does magic with coming up with what we need to do it's going to be the most used for you sales ops people out there, because he is one himself, and a Salesforce expert.
Yeah. And to answer your question, I know custom objects.
I would use booking status cam is what I would use. If you want to, so this use case would be like, guys, if you use concierge today to book meetings for your website, but then someone doesn't book, but maybe you want to do something like more advanced lead to account matching if your system's coming in creating a lead, or maybe you want to do SLAs, or maybe you want to do those field update things. So you can have Chili Piper when someone doesn't book a meeting through the website. Obviously, if you're familiar with queues for those who don't book, it can assign records out like 10 minutes after someone doesn't book a meeting if they were presented the option to. But maybe you want to send it through Distro. So after that timeout, to allow them time to book, we're going to stamp a value booking status onto the leader contact record, which then you can use to trigger Distro, which is actually what Scott, I think, was doing in his, you might have been using meeting type in your example, Scott, but I think booking status is a field that's explicitly supposed to stamp booked or not booked. And that's what I would recommend using if you want to fire off your lead assignment for those who don't book via Distro, which is something a lot of customers have done, because you get more advanced configuration within Distro as compared to cues for prospects who didn't take action, which is a mouthful.
Yeah, I mean, we've got this one set up like exactly. It depends if this is like touching on kind of what you're looking for, but this is exactly what we do. It's just there's a scheduled flow that runs on the contact object, and it just looks for the value to be updated here. And then same kind of deal of is somebody actually working that record, and if it's assigned to an AE, then we'll just notify them. Otherwise, we'll just roll through this for the catch-all and assign it to a different AE, and then we just have an SLA tied to that. So that way we make sure everybody's following up on the high quality leads.
So yeah, Scott and I are big Chili Piper and Salesforce fans, and I think most of what we do somehow involves Salesforce clearly. But sometimes we update a field. I know Cam, we've worked on some of this where you have Salesforce update a field, and that field triggers Chili Piper. So those who like to solve puzzles and do fun automations, this is a great way to do it. All right, well,
Yeah. Any other use cases y'all want us to touch on? Or
I'll tell you, there's one good update yesterday that's worth telling. If there used to be case sensitivity with the rules, so let's say you had every country in the world listed in a set of rules, and somehow Salesforce got it with a lowercase Argentina versus uppercase Argentina, it wouldn't match the rule set. So you have to make sure your data's right. Well, now it's just made case insensitive as of yesterday. So you have a random capital letter somewhere, it's not going to break your rules and make you go add all those different variations of countries into your rules. So operationally, that's very useful. I'm trying to say.
oh yeah, Gaines, I was gonna think, is it worth touching on how to like debug and preview routers? I don't think we touched on that one. I think that's
Yeah, we can probably, you guys are probably familiar with the Salesforce flow. You can preview a record by throwing in an op ID or a contact ID to see how it executes. That exists now in Distro, which is
I like a lot.
Building
So
it.
it's basically like debugging in flows in Salesforce. So once you configure your router, you just enter in that contact ID, for example. So like this one, if you just grab the contact record ID and then input that and you click preview, it'll evaluate through this and show not matching and matching information right here. And then it'll just show the rules that ultimately matched. So that way, if you want to test it out, it's a bit easier than kind of just manually updating and then going back to the logs and seeing what happens. So definitely like this part. Cool.
All right, then.
I think
Yeah,
that on the big parts, but yeah, if y'all got follow-up questions, want to try it out or anything.
If you want an AI previewed picture of yourself, Scott has a paid version of ChatGPT. So I always ask him the questions that I don't get a good answer for with the free version. So also coming with this webinar, free pictures that look much better than you really look in real life, similar to what you saw at the beginning of it. So message Scott with the picture and he'll send you back to the AI version. That's right, Fernando. We'll get you a nice AI generated picture of yourself.
Yeah, Scott loves you. Email Scott with all of your requests for AI pictures. Make sure those all get fulfilled. So thanks everyone for coming. We'll be sending out the recording. Again, everyone who registered for the webinar gets a free trial of Distro for 30 days. So I put that link in the chat, but it'll also be in the follow-up email. So you guys can go in, play around, do whatever you want to. Yeah, thanks again.
All right. Later.